G'day, Chief. Let's talk coaching principles. Coaching principles are the underlying philosophies you have in relation to when you're coaching your people at work. They are really critically important because they shape the language you use, the process you follow, and it's really important over time that you develop some real core philosophies or principles so that when you're in coaching environments, in one-to-one or even team environments, you just come from the right place. It's a congruent place for you and it gets great results in a group. You really want these principles to drive outcomes for you and the people around you, to inspire people to get better results, to improve their skill in the application of a framework or just to get things done, right? That's what we're all about here is at Chief Maker is get results, be bold, bring your people with you, have fun, get in flow. That's the name of the game, right? So how do you do that from a coaching perspective? When you look around you at times and think, wow, my people aren't in flow, or this person isn't in flow, or I'm not in flow. Here's a couple of principles I want you to put in the back of your mind. So when you're in a general coaching engagement or any sort of environment, these are the things you go to again and again. And I'm just going to start out with something that's really important because you might have been in a situation where you're giving someone advice or you're coaching them and they just weren't listening and they weren't following the particular advice or coaching you're giving them. Now, that's really common. Okay, it happens all the time. Leaders will come to me and say, hey, why isn't that person not following? Here's a great example, a great story. This CEO once came to me and said, I need you to work with my director of sales. And he said, look, great guy, this director of sales, life of the party, brilliant, but he's wearing this facade. He's a show, right? There's something missing that we're not seeing. We're not seeing the authentic, true self, all right? And I'll get to the principle in a minute. I just want to finish this story so you understand what I'm saying here. And I said to him, listen, when you are asking someone, because he wanted this particular director of sales to fundamentally change their behavior every single day. Now, this director of sales has been in this role been as an executive for nearly 20 years. This particular method that they were using, right or wrong, was really their only experience of professional life. They were exceptionally good at sales, doing it this particular way with their facade, their veneer, whatever it is, out to the world. They'd never really been authentic, never really drawn back the curtains and shown their soul and their true self. Now, what's at risk here is when you go and work with an individual, and this is what I said to the CEO, I said, this is going to be quite a challenge. You're asking someone who's got 20 years of success to change their recipe. That's going to be a challenge because if they can't congruently see a version of themselves in the future, performing to an even higher level than they are now, they will not shift. This is the core principle. You have to be able to create with the client, with the person you're coaching, a congruent vision of the future self. One where they can see themselves performing even better than they are now and like everything they see about it. Right? It feels right in their bones. Their values are being looked after. They're achieving success and they're being an even better version of themselves. If you can't create that vision of the future, they won't change. This is what we call congruency. A congruent vision. The congruent means all parts of me are on board for this. They agree with it. They think this is the best thing for me. So when you're working with an individual and you're sitting there saying, hey, there's maybe a role that I want to help you coach towards, or there's a project here, or I want you to go and have this difficult conversation with someone and you can see a reluctance. Might be in their physiology, might be in their voice. They might just tell you they won't do it, right? There's something there that you haven't solved for them just yet. As a coach, you've got to work to find that out. What's holding them back is that they can't hear themselves saying the words in a difficult conversation, or they can't get the right pitch and tone right, or they just can't seem to work it out. You've got to work with them on that. It might mean role playing. It might mean shifting mindset. It might mean giving them some language and some words to use, the right kind of questions and process. But until they can see that congruent vision of themselves doing this particular task better than now, it's almost guaranteed they will not do it. There will not be a permanent behavioral shift, even an attempt at it. So what we're trying to do is get them to have one go at doing something better, different than before. And that congruency principle is right at the heart of it. The second principle is this. An insight made by the coach is owned by the coach. An insight made by the client is owned by the client. I remember when I was learning to coach, and when you've been around a few different businesses, you tend to be able to know what the answer is pretty fast. You might walk into a room, you see what's going on with the team, and this will happen more and more as you get into senior leadership roles. You know the answer before anybody else, right? As soon as you know that answer before anybody else, you have to remember, you connected the dots. You made that insight. Nobody else in the room has yet. So it's what we call owned by you. You get it. You're on board. Now it's your job to help someone else connect those dots. Because if you just jump to the answer and you tell everyone, they won't necessarily buy into it. Right? This is why we often do vision and value sessions as a group. Everybody buys in because everyone was a part of the process. They have the insights about the value of values and mantras and standards of behavior, or they have the insight about the value of a shared vision. That's just as important as the vision itself, the value of these things. So when you're in a coaching environment, I want you to think as much as possible. Be as curious as you possibly can and ask questions that shape people's thinking. If they can have the insight about the performance improvement, about the new approach themselves, then they will almost always do it, right? That's when they take ownership of the outcome because they're on it. So as a coach, that's what you're always trying to do, is help someone have that insight themselves. And the final third principle is this, is you have to assume that an individual can be great. Now, a number of times I've walked into someone, I'm into a coaching engagement, maybe they're only at a manager, and we're just sitting and having a coffee, and I ask them about their dream role. And they say, well, I'm not quite sure. And I'll say, well, I assume because we're chatting, you want to be on the executive team in a C-suite role. So let's just break down how you're going to get there. And we just talk through how they're going to increase the quality of their skills and their resources, how they're going to build a track record, how they're going to look after stakeholders and their people, how they're going to play to their strengths. We might talk through all these things. Now, what has happened to me a million times is people look at me confused. And they're confused about the fact that I believe they can be in that C-suite role. Now, that is a fundamental assumption that you have to take to your coaching. You might be in a CEO role and I'm coaching you to be a CEO. Same thing. I believe you can get there if you follow a process. And when I come in completely convinced, the individual immediately starts to believe in themselves too. They get out of their own way. They stop asking questions about, is this possible? Or do I dare to dream about this? And we just get on to solving the problem about how to get there. Now, that doesn't mean everyone will ever be in a C-suite role, but it does mean they can start striving to be the very best they can be. So assume that they can achieve something and then simply start coaching them to that particular outcome. You'll be amazed at how it makes people feel. It really gives them hope. Right? It makes them, it sort of almost says that some of the problems they've been facing aren't really that bad. It just, it just minimizes all the problems. So Chief, there's 3 really powerful principles that I want you to put at the core of your coaching for your people. And even this is away from work as well. If you've got friends who are in challenging situations, maybe you're coaching a sporting team, these are wonderful things to put up your sleeve. So remember, they are congruent outcome. The person must be able to see a congruent version of themselves in the future. An insight made by the coach is owned by the coach. An insight made by the client is owned by the client. And the third one is that you must believe an individual can achieve the outcome, the greatness. They're 3 big ones. Put them in your back pocket and get to work.